what's up, guys? All right, welcome back to Tie One On. All right, so this is actually the second video on the channel. So if you guys haven't checked out the first video, go over and check it out, especially if you're just getting into tying jigs, because we went over a lot of the basics as far as like all the supplies that you're going to need to tie a jig. And then we tied a very simple jig last time. So if you guys haven't checked out the first video on the channel, go over and check it out. I'll actually put a link in the description below to that video. So, but today, second video of the channel, we're just going to get right into tying a jig. So for today's jig, we're going to tie this little 5/16 ounce ball head jig, and this is called my Appetizer jig. So it's a very finesse style jig. You guys will see there's a unique way that I tied the skirt on. And these jigs are actually one of the only jigs that I actually purchase and don't pour. The reason for that is because of the way the line tie is on these jigs. If you could look, I'll try and get it in the camera. You can see how the line tie is built into the jig. And I haven't found a mold yet that offers that. And I really like the way this works. So this is basically just a little 5/16 ounce jig. And another important part of this jig, if you look at the collar here, it has this really thick collar on it. That's going to be very important for the way that we're going to tie the skirt on. So that's why I end up purchasing this jig. All right, so let's get into tying it. Oh, also real quick, before I tie this jig, I just wanted to give you guys a heads up. I wasn't super happy with the quality of the first video. I used a very complex camera that I had gotten a couple years back and haven't really learned yet. There's a couple things when I played the video back, you know, the lighting kept changing and it kept, the focus wasn't there. So I apologize for that. I think the first video came out okay, but as we go on, I'll get better with the camera angles. I think I was a little too close to the vise. So, you know, I appreciate you guys bearing with me through that. And as I learn how to, you know, make these videos, I'll get better at it. So, all right, with that being said, let's go down to the vise and let's tie up this jig. All right, guys, here we go. So I think this is a little bit better angle on the vise, and it looks like the focus is much clearer. I'm actually, believe it or not, shooting this on my iPhone, and it looks pretty good. So I'm pretty impressed with it. These iPhones nowadays and you know, these smartphones, man, the cameras blow you away, because the camera I was using the other day was real expensive camera, and my iPhone camera's blowing it away so far. All right, so anyway, let's tie this jig up. So the material we're going to use today, this is also from Fishing Skirts Online. This is just a straight black skirt. This number on here is 034. So if you just need straight black silicone skirt, go over to fishingskirts.com, type in 034 in the search, and the straight black will come up. What I like to do for this jig, though, is I take one of these full tabs and I cut it in half. So I use 3 of them for each jig. So I got 3 half pieces, and I'll show you why I cut these in half once we put the jig in the vise. But that's what I use for the skirt for one of these. All right, so I'm gonna put the jig in the vise. Let's lock it down. Good. And then also on the rotary part, it's a little loose. There's also a knob here that you could adjust the tension and make it a little harder to turn the vise. So I just wanted a little bit tighter than what it was. Okay, that's perfect. All right, now let's start tying this jig. All right, so again, we're going to take our black 2-tendoneer flat wax nylon thread, and we're going to start our base. All right, let me get a piece out. Here we go. So we're going to just wrap a couple times. Now I like to take this and fold it over, wrap a couple more times to trap it. Okay, and then we're going to cut the tag end off. There we go. Okay, good. All right, so now we're ready to start putting our material on. I'm just going to build this up a little bit more because of the way that I tie this skirt on. All right, so now we're going to take one of the skirts, one of the half tabs, we're going to lay it on here. I like to keep the tab to the front. We're going to lay it on here and do a couple wraps. 1, 2, good. Now what I want to do with this is I want to pull this up and I want it even on both sides. So as I pull this up, I want it to be dead even. So it's got to get pulled up forward a little more. Okay, let me see. A little bit more. Let me see. You got to just play with it a little bit. So when I pull the tabs up, especially I got to account for, you know, this piece being cut off. I want them to be pretty much dead even. So that seems about right. And you'll see why that is in a second. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to work my material around and make sure it's nice and even. Again, I like to do the top half and then the bottom half. So okay, good. That looks pretty even. Now we're going to make a couple wraps to trap it. And then we want to, when we build our collar here, we want to build the collar wide enough so it goes all the way to this collar here and all the way to the head. The reason for that is we're going to cinch down on this skirt and it's going to make it flare out. So we need the thread to be right against the collar and the head of the jig to trap the skirt to make it flare out. So so that's what I'm doing. I'm just building the collar up wide enough so this way it touches both. Okay, that's good. We're not going to cinch it down yet. And so again, just like the last jig we did, I like to put a tab and a half on top. So I'm going to take this one and I'm going to rip it in half. Okay. And then again, what I like to do is I like to measure. So we already got our measurement here. So basically I'm just going to line this up with the front one, lay it down so it's even, make a couple wraps to trap it, and then spread our material out. Takes a little bit of playing with to get the material to spread out. Let me see. All right, that looks pretty good. All right, so now we're gonna make a couple wraps to trap it. And we're gonna turn around and do the other side. All right, so now we're gonna do the bottom part of the jig. Again, I like to take the tab, pull it out, match them up. There we go. Pull it nice and tight. Make sure you get all the material right there and wrap. Make a couple wraps. Okay, and now I'm gonna work it around so it meets on either side because we went halfway, you know, around the front side. So now we're gonna meet up with each side on wrapping around the bottom part of the jig. Okay. That looks good. Good, okay. Now let's make a couple wraps to trap everything. Good, okay. And then lastly, we're gonna put that other half tab in. So we're just gonna match it up, make sure it's even. Let it come down. All right, now we're gonna trap it with a couple wraps, and then we're gonna spread our material out. All right, that looks pretty good. We got coverage all the way around. Okay, so now here's where we're gonna make the jig pop. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna wrap all the way up to the ball, and then we're gonna make some tight wraps. And as you can see, as I'm making these tight wraps, you can see the material start to flare out. You can't go too tight. You gotta be careful because you'll break the thread, but you wanna go tight enough where you're making the material flare out. Now we're gonna come down, we're gonna work it down to that collar, that thick collar that I showed you guys. We're gonna make sure our material's back, and okay, let's wrap nice and tight against that collar. Make some tight wraps, and as I let go, you can see how this really starts flaring out. So now what we're gonna do is We're good. We're gonna do our whip finish now. So again, with 2 fingers, pull it up to the side, come over, and 1. As I come over each time, I'm doing the quarter turn. Make sure we don't trap our material. 2, 3. Make sure you just got to be careful and take your time. Make sure you don't trap any of the material. 4, and 1 more is 5. So I'll pull it this way and then cinch it down nice and tight. Good. We're going to do 1 more of those. It's called the whip finish. Again, what I'm going to do is pull the thread up, take my 2 fingers, push down, pull over, and I'm going to do a quarter turn. And each time I go over, this finger is guiding the thread around and through. And then again, guiding the thread around, through. I turn, quarter turn again. I guide over, come down, quarter turn, guide over, come down, pull it up this way, and then we follow it down. And there we go. And we're going to cinch that down nice and tight. And then we're going to cut the thread. Nice and tight. There we go. Perfect. All right. So now what we're going to do is we're going to pull this material back and we're going to seal it with our Sally Hansen's Tough as Nails. Let me open this up. Okay. Make sure you wipe it off because you don't want to get too much on here. Otherwise it'll run all over. And you definitely don't want to get it on the silicone skirt. So make sure you get all the excess off. Pull our material back. And then this is again where I like to use the rotary function of the vise. Turn it around and make sure I get a good coverage. Get in there and try not to get those silicone skirt. There we go. Perfect. All right. So now we got our Sally Hansen's on. So next order of business, we're going to cut the front tabs off. And then this should really pop out. There we go. This is a very cool jig in the water. When it actually hits bottom, the jig will actually flare out. It's really cool. It's a really small jig. It's got a small profile to it. It's great for smallies. And basically you just use, a little trailer on the back. A lot of times what I like to use is I'll use just a Ned rig, a Ned rig worm. And I'll even cut it down a little bit, put that on the back, and it looks perfect. But you can see how this jig really flares out. And then the last thing we're going to do is put our weed guard in. But today with the weed guard, we're going to do something a little different. So what I like to do, I don't want to use the full weed guard because it's a very finessey jig. It's got a somewhat thin hook to it. So I want to make sure I get a good hook set without the weed guard getting in the way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my scissors. All right, I'm going to go through the weed guard, probably about halfway, a little less. I'm going to bring my scissor all the way up, and I'm going to cut. There we go. So now you can see, hold on, let me get it in focus. I don't know if you could see that, but you can see how I cut part of the weed guard off. So now what you want to do is you want to make sure that this is in the front and that piece that's cut off is in the back. So this way it's nice and loose. Otherwise, if you do this way and you come this way, you still are pushing against the bottom piece and it still has the tension. But if you flip it around this way, it'll fold over much easier. So, all right. And then next, what I'm going to do, I'm going to go in. We're going to find our hole in here. Take our Loctite super glue. We're going to put a little dab in there. And then I like to put a little dab on the tip here as well. And again, so now when we put this in, we want to make sure, again, that this piece is to the back, the piece that was cut. So we're just gonna pull this back, make sure that that's in the right direction. Pop our weed guard in. Perfect. There we go. All right. Let that sit for a second. And then again, what I like to do, I like to come down, find where it crosses, just crosses over the barb of the hook, which is going to be right about here. I'll mark it with my finger. We'll get our skirt out of the way. We don't want to cut our skirt by accident. And then I just like to come through and make a cut. There we go. Oops. Sorry about that. All right, we're good to go. It covers perfectly. Alrighty. Take this out of the vise and show you guys. All right. And that's it right there, guys. That's my appetizer jig. Again, this thing gets a lot of bites, man, because it's such a small, compact jig. It's got a cool profile that they don't see that often. And again, when this thing hits the bottom, it just flares out. So I think that draws a lot of strikes. All right, guys, that's it for today. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.